You've prayed about it so many times that you almost know the words by heart. The same request, the same hope, the same quiet question you've carried into countless nights. You asked God to make a way, to heal what was broken, to provide what was missing, to change what seemed impossible. Yet weeks became months, months became years, and sometimes the silence felt heavier than the struggle itself. You wondered if God heard you. You wondered if your prayer mattered. But tonight, God wants you to hear something. The prayer you thought was delayed has never been ignored. The tears you cried were never unseen. The hope you almost gave up on was never forgotten, because while you were waiting for an answer, God was already working behind the scenes. And what you've been praying for may be closer than you think. Maybe you're tired in a way that most people don't understand. Not physically tired, soul tired. The kind of tiredness that comes from hoping for something for so long that you no longer know what to expect. You've prayed faithfully. You've tried to stay positive. You've told yourself to be patient. But deep down, there have been moments when disappointment crept into your heart. Moments when you wondered why the answer seemed to come so easily for other people. Moments when you watched someone else receive the breakthrough you were praying for. The opportunity, the healing, the relationship, the financial relief, the peace. And if you're honest, it hurt. Not because you weren't happy for them, but because you were still waiting, still hoping, still asking. There were nights when you lay awake, replaying every detail, questioning yourself, questioning your timing, questioning whether you had done something wrong. You tried not to let doubt take over, but sometimes it whispered in the quiet moments. What if nothing changes? What if this prayer is never answered? What if I'm hoping for too much? Those thoughts can become heavy after a while, especially when nobody sees the battle you're fighting inside. People see your smile. They hear you say you're okay, but they don't always see the weight you've been carrying, the unanswered questions, the private tears, the silent disappointments, the prayers you stopped talking about because it hurt too much to explain them again. And perhaps that's the hardest part, feeling like you're carrying something nobody fully understands. But God understands. He knows every prayer you've repeated, every fear you've hidden, every moment you almost gave up. He knows about the tears that never reached anyone else's eyes. He knows about the dreams you still carry deep in your heart, the dreams you've protected, because they're too important to let go of completely. And tonight, God wants you to know that your waiting has not been invisible. Your prayers have not disappeared into silence. Your hope has not been wasted, even though you cannot yet see the full picture. God sees every part of it, every struggle, every delay, every moment you chose to keep believing when it would have been easier to quit. That matters more than you realize, because the story is not over, and the prayer you've carried for so long is still known by the one who hears every word, even the one spoken through tears. Right now, before anything changes in your circumstances, God wants to remind you of something that matters more than you realize. You are not facing this season alone. Even when the days felt long, even when the answers seemed distant, even when you wondered if anyone understood what you were carrying, God was there. He was there during the prayers you whispered before falling asleep. He was there during the mornings when you woke up, disappointed that nothing seemed different. He was there in the moments when you felt strong, and He was there in the moments when you felt like you had nothing left to give. You may not have always felt His presence. You may not have seen evidence that He was working, but God's presence has never depended on what you can see. There were times when you thought silence meant absence, but silence does not mean abandonment. A seed grows in silence before it breaks through the ground. A sunrise begins long before its light reaches the horizon. And sometimes God is doing His deepest work in seasons when you can see the least. He knows every detail of your life, every burden, every concern, every prayer. Nothing about your struggle is hidden from Him. Nothing about your situation has caught Him by surprise. The thing keeping you awake at night is already known to God. The prayer you've repeated 100 times is already known to God. The answer you're waiting for is already known to God. And because He knows, you can rest, not because you have all the answers, not because every problem is solved, but because the one holding your future is trustworthy. Tonight, God is inviting you to release some of the pressure you've been carrying, the pressure to figure everything out, the pressure to control every outcome, the pressure to know exactly when and how things will change. You were never meant to carry those burdens alone. God is not asking you to see the entire path ahead. He is simply asking you to trust that He can see what you cannot, because while you have been focused on the waiting, He has been focused on the purpose. While you have been counting the days, He has been arranging the details. While you have been wondering if He heard your prayer, He has been holding every word close to His heart. So take a deep breath. Let your heart slow down for a moment. You do not need to earn God's attention. You already have it. You do not need to convince Him to care. He already does. And no matter how long this season has felt, one truth remains unchanged. God sees you, God hears you, God is with you, and He has not forgotten your prayer. One of the hardest parts of waiting is that the battle often becomes invisible. The struggle is no longer just about the prayer itself. It becomes a battle inside your mind, a battle between faith and doubt, hope and discouragement, trust and fear. At first, waiting feels manageable. You tell yourself to be patient. You remind yourself that God's timing is perfect. You keep believing, but as time passes, new questions begin to appear. Questions you never expected to ask. Why is it taking so long? Did I misunderstand what God was telling me? Am I still supposed to keep hoping? Those questions can become heavy, especially when the answer doesn't arrive as quickly as you expected. That's when discouragement tries to move in. Not all at once, little by little, quietly, almost unnoticed. It whispers that nothing is changing. It tells you to lower your expectations. It convinces you that protecting yourself from disappointment is safer than believing again. And if you're not careful, discouragement begins to sound reasonable. But there is something important you need to understand. The greatest threat to your future is not the delay. It is allowing the delay to steal your hope, because hope is often the first thing the waiting season attacks. The longer the journey feels, the easier it becomes to focus on what hasn't happened, the opportunities that didn't come, the answers that didn't arrive, the breakthroughs that seem far away. Soon, your attention becomes fixed on the absence of movement. And when that happens, it's easy to overlook the quiet ways God is still working. Here's what many people miss. Not all progress is visibly. Not all answers arrive immediately. Not all preparation can be seen from the outside. Sometimes God is working beneath the surface, long before anything changes above it. Just because you cannot see movement does not mean nothing is moving. Just because you cannot see the answer does not mean God has stopped working. Just because the prayer remains unanswered today does not mean it will remain unanswered forever. Fear wants you to believe that waiting means failure. But waiting and failure are not the same thing. Delay and denial are not the same thing. Silence and absence are not the same thing. And this changes everything. Because what if this season is not evidence that God has forgotten you? What if it is evidence that He is preparing something carefully? What if the very thing causing frustration today will make sense tomorrow? What if the waiting has purpose? What if the delay has meaning? What if God sees a bigger picture than you can currently understand? These are the questions that begin to shift the battle, because faith is not pretending everything is easy. Faith is choosing to trust God even when everything is unclear. Faith is believing that God's goodness is still present during seasons that make no sense. Faith is continuing to walk forward when certainty is unavailable, and that is exactly what you've been doing. You may not feel strong. You may not feel confident. You may not feel full of faith every day, but you're still here, still listening, still praying, still hoping. And that matters more than you know, because every time you choose hope over despair, faith grows stronger. Every time you choose trust over fear, your heart becomes more resilient. Every time you refuse to give up completely, you take another step toward what God is preparing. The battle has been real. The waiting has been difficult. The questions have been heavy. But none of those things have changed one important truth. God is still working, and the story He is writing is not finished yet. There comes a moment in every waiting season when something begins to change, not necessarily around you, but within you, and often that inner shift becomes the beginning of everything else. For so long, you've been focused on the answer, the breakthrough, the opportunity, the moment when the prayer finally becomes reality. But what if God has been preparing more than an answer? What if He has been preparing you? Think about how much you've learned during this season, not because it was easy, but because it wasn't. You've learned how to keep going when results were nowhere in sight. You've learned how to trust when certainty was unavailable. You've learned how to pray even when emotions told you to quit. Those lessons were not meaningless. They were shaping you, strengthening you, preparing you for what comes next. Because God is not only interested in answering prayers, He is interested in preparing hearts. And sometimes preparation happens in places where progress cannot yet be seen. That's why tonight, God wants you to stop measuring your life only by visible results. Because some of the most important things He has been doing cannot be measured that way. Your patience has grown. Your wisdom has grown, your compassion has grown, your faith has grown. Even when it felt like nothing was happening, something was happening. You were becoming stronger, and here's what you've been missing. Many answers arrive quietly before they arrive visibly. A new connection, a new opportunity, a new idea, a new conversation, a new direction. A small opening that eventually becomes a major breakthrough. God often begins moving pieces long before you recognize what He is doing. That's why you must not mistake today's uncertainty for tomorrow's outcome. The chapter you're living in now is not the final chapter. The delay is not the destination. The waiting is not the conclusion. Something is shifting. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not in the way you expected. But God is still moving, still arranging details, still opening paths you cannot yet see. And perhaps the greatest sign of all is this: you haven't lost the desire to believe. Despite the disappointments, despite the delays, despite the unanswered questions, a part of your heart still hopes. A part of your heart still listens. A part of your heart still believes that God can do something beautiful with your story. That hope is not weakness. It is evidence that God is not finished. So tonight, instead of asking, "Why hasn't it happened yet?" try asking, "What is God preparing?" Instead of focusing only on what is missing, begin noticing what is growing, because the turning point often begins when expectation replaces frustration, when trust becomes stronger than fear, when faith becomes louder than doubt, and that turning point may be closer than you realize. The prayer you've carried for so long has not been forgotten. The answer is not lost. God is still writing the story, and what feels like waiting today may soon become the testimony of how faithfully He was working all along. Before God changes a situation, He often restores something even more important: the way you see yourself. Because long seasons of waiting have a way of affecting more than your circumstances. They affect your confidence, your expectations, your belief in what is possible. After enough delays, it's easy to start questioning yourself. Easy to wonder whether you're still worthy of the blessing you're praying for. Easy to believe that maybe other people are more qualified, more capable, or more deserving. But God wants to speak directly to that fear tonight. Your value has never been determined by how quickly your prayers are answered. Your worth has never been measured by your circumstances. And your purpose has never depended on how many setbacks you've experienced. You are not forgotten because you're waiting. You are not overlooked because you're struggling. You are not less important because your journey looks different from someone else's. God has never compared your story to theirs, and you don't need to compare it either. The truth is, you've been carrying more strength than you realize. Every day you kept going when you felt discouraged. Every prayer you whispered when nobody else knew you were hurting. Every time you chose hope instead of giving up completely, those moments mattered. They revealed something beautiful about who you are. You are resilient. You are faithful. You are stronger than the circumstances that tried to break you. And most importantly, You are deeply loved by God, not because of what you've accomplished, not because you've done everything perfectly, not because you've earned it. You are loved because that is who God is. His love is not based on performance. It is not based on success. It is not based on whether you're currently living in a season of abundance or a season of waiting. His love remains constant, and that means your identity remains secure. You do not have to prove your worth. You do not have to earn God's attention. You do not have to convince Him that your prayer matters. It already does. You matter. Your story matters. Your future matters. The dream you've been carrying matters. The tears you've cried matter. The prayers you've prayed matter. Nothing has been wasted. Not the pain, not the waiting, not the lessons, not even the disappointments. God has a way of using every chapter, even the difficult ones, to shape something meaningful. That's why you can stop speaking about yourself as if your best days are behind you. You can stop defining yourself by what didn't happen. You can stop measuring your future by your past disappointments. Because God sees something greater. He sees possibility where you see limitation. He sees purpose where you see delay. He sees growth where you see struggle. And He sees a future that is still filled with hope. Tonight, let that truth settle into your heart. You are not abandoned. You are not invisible. You are not disqualified. You are not too late. You are still seen, still valued, still chosen, still loved. And the God who knows your name has not forgotten the prayer that lives in your heart. Now, take a moment and imagine what it will feel like when the answer finally arrives. Not because every challenge disappears, not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you will finally see what God was doing during all the days you thought nothing was happening. One day, the prayer that feels distant today may become part of your testimony. One day, the thing you cried about may become the thing you thank God for. One day, the waiting may finally make sense, because God specializes in bringing hope into places that once seemed hopeless. He specializes in opening paths where none appeared to exist. He specializes in creating possibilities that human eyes could not see. And perhaps that is why your story is not finished. The answer you've been waiting for may not arrive exactly the way you imagine. It may come through an unexpected opportunity, an unexpected conversation, an unexpected relationship, an unexpected door. But when God's timing unfolds, you often realize that He was working in ways you never could have planned for yourself. That's why tonight is not about trying to force an outcome. It's about preparing your heart to receive what God is doing. Because receiving requires faith. Receiving requires trust. Receiving requires the willingness to believe that good things are still possible. And deep down, that hope is still alive inside you. Maybe it feels small. Maybe it has been bruised by disappointment. Maybe it has survived more setbacks than you ever expected. But it is still there. And God can do remarkable things with even the smallest spark of hope. The breakthrough begins long before the answer appears. It begins when your heart starts believing again, when peace starts replacing fear, when expectation starts replacing discouragement, when trust becomes stronger than doubt. That shift changes everything. Because once hope returns, you stop looking at the future through the lens of yesterday's disappointments. You begin looking at it through the lens of God's faithfulness. And His faithfulness has carried you this far. The same God who heard your first prayer still hears your prayers today. The same God who carried you through difficult seasons is carrying you now. The same God who has guided you through every chapter of your life is still guiding your steps. So, hold on a little longer. Keep praying, keep believing, keep trusting, not because you have all the answers, but because God is still writing your story, and the chapter ahead may contain blessings, peace, opportunities, and restoration greater than anything you can currently see. Your prayer has been heard, your waiting has meaning, and your future is still held securely in the hands of a God who never forgets His children. Tonight, let your heart rest. You do not need to carry every worry into tomorrow. You do not need to have every answer right now. The God who heard your first prayer still hears you today. The God who carried you through yesterday is already waiting in your tomorrow. So release your fears. Release your doubts. Release the burden of trying to figure everything out, and simply trust that God is working, even when you cannot see it. May peace fill your heart tonight. May hope rise where discouragement once lived. May faith become stronger than fear. And may you wake tomorrow with renewed confidence that your life is still guided by God's loving hand. Your prayer matters. Your story matters. And you matter. Rest tonight, knowing that you are seen, you are loved, and you are never forgotten. The answer may be closer than you think. Until then, keep believing, keep trusting, and keep moving forward. God is not finished with your story yet.